navigate towards impact. So how evidence-based approaches can guide innovation and scaling pathways. And I was happy that Mina was already referring to scaling as one of the interconnected priority areas. So that's a nice bridge to my presentation. So I think, you know, the key takeaways from my presentation are as follows. So food systems, they are inherently complex and volatile. So whether we like it or not, this is just the way it is. This is what reality looks like. And we need systems approaches to understand the dynamics, but also to identify entry points for innovation and scaling. So it's not just enough to analyze and to try to understand what's going on, but we also want to intervene and make things better. And one of my experiences is that the system complexity, that sometimes it can paralyze action. You know, people get lost in the complexity and feel like everything is connected to everything. So, you know, it's very difficult to oversee what action will actually, or an intervention will actually result in. And this was a starting point for developing an innovative methodology to understand and intervene in complex adaptive food system. And this is called scaling readiness, and will be the focus of my talk. So with scaling readiness, is really not about like trying to think linear, but more like how do we navigate complexity through short and long-term feedback loops. And that kind of balanced action, like the idea there is that we balance action with reflection and adaptation. So the first question is that I want to address is why scaling of innovation matters for resilient food systems. So first of all, innovation can play an important role in increasing agri-food system resilience. So there's all kinds of research, development, work going on that can help us to increase the resilience of food systems. These kinds of innovations, they can be of technological nature. So think about like weather forecasting systems or precision agriculture and other technologies, but also very much of institutional nature. So for example, climate insurance, providing access to finance for farmers, trying to organize different stakeholders in the system, like what Mina also referred to. I think those we also should see those kinds of things as innovations. So, and usually people, when they hear the word innovation, they immediately think about a new product or a tool, but we should broaden our thinking of innovation. And there's actually billions of euros being invested by governments, by private sector, by development funders and impact investors for innovation to deal with short-term and long-term challenges in food systems. And what is also very important to keep in mind is that today's solutions were probably some crazy ideas of 10, 15 years ago that somebody decided to invest in. And through trial and error and adaptation and learning, these are some of the solutions of today. And the same goes for the investments that we make today. They will not be the solutions of tomorrow, but they will be the solutions of maybe 10, 15 years further down the line. So innovation used at scale is essential for impact. It's not just enough that we have good products that are lying on the shelf, which happens with a lot of research or science-based innovation. They have to be used in practice for them to actually contribute to impact. And the context in which many of us work is quite unique. Like myself, I work in a research for development context, which means that all of the investments and all of the activities and projects that we do have an impact objective. So with every piece of science or innovation development, we have a story of how that could eventually contribute to solving some big development challenges, climate related, agrobiodiversity related, nutrition related, and what have you. But and this image visualizes what's often referred to the valley of death. It is not so easy to go from the research side of the bridge to the development side. You know, there are different worlds with different cultures, And many innovations, they actually get stuck, not even halfway on the bridge, but even before that. So in research, we are working on designing and testing innovations, whereas in development, we want to use those proven innovations that are actually can be used at scale. In research, often we abstract things and we try to work on things that have global relevance, whereas in order to have impact, especially in the agricultural sector, contextualization and local embeddedness and relevance is very important. In research, we work with few stakeholders involved in testing, piloting, whereas in development, we are focused on sometimes trying to deliver innovation to millions of farmers or other beneficiaries. And then there's, of course, the time horizons. Like in research, we say like, okay, yeah, we are going to work on this. We'll get back to you in the next 4 years. Whereas in development, some of the solutions, they are required now. If you get a request from the Minister of Agriculture here, you cannot tell her like, okay, we'll start working on it and get back to you in the next 2 years. No, she wants a solution tomorrow. So these worlds are very, very different. And I already explained a little bit like why there is overall poor performance in the research for development sector. And one of the main reasons is that we focus a lot on technologies, but not so much on the systemic enablers. So we can, as I said, we can have great products, but if the markets, the access to the finance, the capacity development of farmers and other stakeholders, bringing people together, facilitating policy change, then these technologies often do not lead to desired impact. And one of the reasons is that we do not use enough evidence-based approaches to identify these bottlenecks for innovation use at scale. Because I will show that many of the bottlenecks are actually more the systemic enablers rather than the quality of the technology. So we see that these are often ignored or framed to be outside the zone of comfort or influence for organizations that are working on technology delivery. And I think this is a bad thing. Even if you as an organization cannot really create an enabling situation, we should partner with those people or organizations who can actually do that, private sector and government. And last but not least, there's often unrealistic ideas about how we can navigate towards impact. So, there's a lot of projects being written where we have a great idea, and then by the end of the 3rd year, we're supposed to reach 2 million farmers, and it's not compatible with how innovation and scaling pathways work. So as I said, to try to flip it around, like there's some light at the end of the tunnel. But we really need to change our mindset and culture of thinking about impacts. So much more thinking early on about scalability of innovations, use evidence, be realistic, embrace failure and learning. That out of the 100 innovative ideas, maybe only 5 will become the game changers of the future. So along the way, it means that 95 of them will not. So what do we do with that? And really try to think contextualized and fit for purpose about partnerships. So the scaling readiness approach embodies this scaling the new way, and I will quickly run you through some of the key principles. So the original concept was developed by myself and Dr. Murat Sartas in 2017, and it was based on 5 principles. So the first principle is that innovations scale as part of packages. So this is really embodies the agriculture innovation systems approach that, if you drop a technology in the middle of a community or in the middle of a desert, it will not mean that it will immediately do what it's supposed to do. We have to consider these enabling conditions that are part of any kind of systemic change. Innovation scaling pathways can be measured using evidence. So we went into identifying key metrics that can help us to meaningfully track innovation development and use. How can we support strategizing around bottlenecks? So how can we basically make it more difficult for projects to ignore some of these systemic enablers that are often limiting the impact potential of innovation? How can we embrace that scaling is a multi-stakeholder affair and not just something that an organization or can lead on its own? And how do we appreciate that scaling is an emergent and unpredictable process of change rather than a linear pathway where we put in place A, B, and C, and then we reach objective X. That's not how it works. And our key challenge was like, how do we support our natural science colleagues and social science colleagues in achieving that? So we developed a very simple but effective stepwise approach to consider all of these different aspects of scaling. And the idea behind this stepwise approach was really to avoid this action paralysis. So, you know, that people get paralyzed going into action because they cannot oversee all that's going on. So really the first step is around characterizing the innovation and the innovation system. So what are we developing and scaling? Why are we doing that? What's our ambition? Where does the demand come from? And then usually people have a very good idea about what is the innovation that they are working on. For example, you know, we have a digital weather forecasting system, or we have an improved drought-tolerant wheat variety, or we have a late blight-resistant potato variety, or what have you. But through a facilitated process, we actually try to ask them the question like, what else needs to be in place for this late blight-resistant potato variety to actually end up with the farmers and be used at scale? So then, you know, you start thinking about the seed system, you start thinking about, is there markets for this new variety? You start thinking about like, are the farmers aware of this variety? Can they afford the variety? Is the variety compatible with their farming system? And etc. So really through interaction, we are trying to help them develop an innovation package around the core solution that they are trying to scale. And I think this aligns very well with the basic theme of this conference, which actually in the announcement said that interventions aiming to increase the resilience of food system will have different impacts for different geographical contexts, depending on agroecology, climate setting, policies, partner engagement, and etc. So what this means actually is that for scaling the same innovation in different countries, in Europe, in Africa, it doesn't really matter, the package will be different. Because the seed system will be different, because the policy and institutional setting will be different. The agroecological and climatic conditions will be different. The consumer preferences will be different, and etc. So you can already see that, you know, this kind of thinking about scaling, systemic approach about scaling, it does not allow for copy-paste approaches. We really have to think about embedding innovations in the local context. In some cases, it can be national, local context. In some cases, we have to go even at the subnational level and see what is the heterogeneity that we are actually facing with. So, for example, scaling innovation X in Serbia will look different from scaling innovation X in Spain. This is just to summarize what I've just said. Context matters. Now, for each of these elements of an innovation package, we thought what would be a useful metric to try to see where they are in terms of their development. Are they an idea? Are they innovations that already have been you know, undergoing basic research, proof of concept, and maybe some initial testing in the laboratory? Are these innovations that already have been tested in controlled, semi-controlled conditions, so in farmers' fields, but with a small sample of farmers? Or are these innovations that are already proven to work in an uncontrolled market or policy environment? So we are really trying to see for each of the elements of the innovation package, like where are these innovations in terms of their maturity or development stage. And we have adapted a readiness scale that is actually used by, or was introduced by NASA to fit not just technologies, but also more institutional and organizational types of innovations. Well, that's not enough, because we don't want just like innovations that are very ready for scaling. We want them to be used, because only through use we can achieve impact. So again, we developed a metric that looks at use, not along a simple more is better scale, because that doesn't work. But looking more like how is the innovation penetrating into the agricultural innovation network. So basically, we score higher when innovations are used by people that have nothing to do with the organization, the project that actually supported the development of these kinds of innovations. So what we usually see is that if we don't use a network approach, that it's very easy to incentivize farmers to use an innovation. So if you have money enough in your project, you can easily have 200,000 farmers use your innovation. But when you stop incentivizing them, actually they will, in many cases, stop using your innovation. So in a sense, like we try to use a more meaningful metric for monitoring use of innovation. So the scaling readiness then assesses the innovation use and the innovation readiness of each of the elements in an innovation package. So this could be the innovation, the resistant variety that you're trying to scale, but all of these other things also need to work and be in place and be used for this innovation to actually be used by many farmers. So as I already said, like what we often see is that the technologies are not the limiting element in the package. It's usually the collective communal actions or farmer organization, or for example, a government seed system that is not able to deliver the resistant variety to the farmers. And then we apply the law of minimum, which then looks at, okay, where's the water actually leaking from the barrel? And so do we want to invest in making this resistant variety even a little bit better? Or is it much wiser to invest in overcoming these kinds of lower scoring bottlenecks that are represented here by the staves in the barrel where the water is leaking out? You will see that, you know, making some of these staves that are already high even higher is not going to keep more water in the barrel. So this can be used as an organizing principle and to visualize and also to urge people to invest in those lower scoring elements in an innovation package. We can then consider different kinds of options. This is from business literature, management literature. So what are we going to do about these bottlenecks? So the easy and the cheapest or less resource intense option is to substitute. So can we replace a bottleneck innovation in a package by another innovation that has a higher readiness? And I will give an example of that. If that's not possible, are there other organizations or experts that can help us to improve on the bottleneck? If that's not possible, can we develop it ourselves as part of our intervention or projects? Is that within our mandate and capacities? If that's not possible, then we should ask ourselves the question, like, if we cannot overcome these bottlenecks, do we actually want to continue to invest in scaling in this specific context? Or is there maybe another country or another context where we can find more enabling conditions, et cetera, et cetera? So it goes all the way down to stopping an intervention, because if your conclusion is that you cannot overcome the key bottlenecks for scaling innovations in your package, then basically you're flushing money and resources down the drain. So it may be more effective to stop the intervention and to focus on something else. So again, let's go back to this example. So in this case, you know, we go for a substitute option. You know, the government functional seed system is the key bottleneck. We can actually achieve the same effect by working with a local private seed multiplier who's already there, who's already, you know, farmers have already access. They have a cost-efficient model to actually multiply this resistant variety that we are trying to scale here. And that also, it shows that this can help us to select fit for purpose partners in scaling innovation. Of course, we need to appreciate that there's a lot of politics in these kinds of choices, because going back to the previous slide, we were working with the government here on delivering the resistant variety, and all of a sudden we saw that for achieving impact, actually, it would be more efficient to work with a local private seed multiplier. Of course, that can have all kinds of political implications. So we need to take that into account, and therefore the best strategy may not always be the most politically feasible strategy. So sometimes we may have to go for the second best strategy in order to mitigate some of the consequences. When we start implementing our strategies, we can ask ourselves the question like, did the strategy and action have the desired results? Yes or no? Do we continue to invest? Bottlenecks will change, investments will change, but the ultimate objective is to try to get all of the package element to the top right corner, where the elements are proven to work and are used by many people. And that's what we call an outcome. If many people are using an innovation, and the assumption is that if many people are using an innovation that actually works, then that could contribute to impact. So these gates, they basically represent decision making. So if we don't see progress despite of heavy investment and a lot of resources, human, financial, time, going into trying to improve the readiness of the package, then we need to ask ourselves that question, like, do we continue investing? And I think this slide also nicely visualizes this idea of having short-term loops of intervention and action. So making an assessment of the system, determining on your investment and intervention, looking at the results, reassessing, making again a decision on investment and action. That this is a nice way to somehow break down a longer-term change process into interventions that can be somehow overseen, managed, and that feel like we have some sort of control. Although we appreciate that the context changes, that the demands changes, partners may go bankrupt, COVID may all of a sudden emerge where nobody had ever heard from it and create all kinds of new challenges. So that we do appreciate the complex and the changing environment, but we also try to somehow take snapshots and say like, okay, based on the best possible information we have, what is our best bet for trying to make this work? But I've mainly spoken on, why this is useful at a project level. And I'm sure many of you on the call are already trying to think about your own projects and what your package would look like. But what we increasingly see is that organizations want to use these metrics to manage a portfolio of innovation. So a portfolio of innovation is basically a multitude of innovation packages, that are somewhere along the readiness and use lines of growth. And we can map them. This can be helpful to monitor and manage a portfolio over time at initiative, at project or program or initiative or thematic or country level, whatever you prefer. To make decisions as part of performance management and stage gating, what I already said, that if we invest so much but we don't see any progress, are we continuing to invest, or do we need to redirect or reallocate those investments? Support resource allocation. So thinking about like which packages need research investment versus which packages need delivery or scaling investment. And think also about strategic resource mobilization. So if we have packages that have a high level of readiness, like can we find an investor or a funder or a government, or it can be a private sector that is actually willing to invest in its delivery. Now, these kinds of like portfolio management approaches, they can give managers, whether you are a project manager or a manager at a higher organizational level, or a thematic manager or a country manager, nice overview of what's actually going on under your mandate area as a basis for decision making. So does it work? Because it's a nice story, but it could be a nice conceptual story. Yes, so we see that scaling readiness is used globally by a broad range of organizations, so academia, research for development, but also increasingly impact investors. We have gathered evidence that scaling readiness positively influenced scaling strategy design and outcomes in projects. CGIAR, the organization that I'm working for, has invested or earmarked $19 million to mainstream this approach across the whole portfolio over the next 2 years. We see increasingly that donors are interested. So amongst others, GIZ, but also the Gates Foundation, they are looking into how to use innovation readiness and innovation use as metrics in their results framework. And I think this is what I'm most proud of. We developed an online course to explain more about the scaling readiness key concepts. And we had 1,500 participants in 3 months, which I think really shows like the need for capacity development, but also for the desire that people have to learn more about innovative approaches that can help innovation and scaling. So if you want more information, there's a bunch of reference materials that I can share. The course is online, it's free. It'll take 3 hours to go over the main concepts. There's a scaling readiness website, and we have quite a lot of like existing materials on where and how it was applied in Africa, in Europe, and in other places. And with that, I would like to also thank you for your time and looking forward to the discussion.